We meet up with a couple of our friends who are already in South Padre, and we say, yo, we're going to Matamoros, Mexico. You want to come? They love the idea. About a group of 10 of us go. We get there, we park in this free parking lot, and right when we get to the front of the bridge, there's a gentleman walking around with these flyers. And he hands me the flyer, and it's the complete detailed story of Mark Kilroy, which I find fascinating. At that time, remember, I'm a religious studies student, and I was fascinated with the kind of religious aspect of it, even though it was obviously a horrific story. But they're giving us this piece of paper because they're telling us, do not follow anybody anywhere. Do not go off the main strip that is, built for spring break, basically, and services spring break. Do not let people talk you into anything. Stay together in a group. Never leave your group. They're basically giving everybody this information, which, again, at that time, this stuff to me sounds exciting. I'm just like, whoa, this is crazy. I mean, I've always had that kind of weird, excitement for things of this nature, Not that I want to get killed or I want to get, mutilated or something by some group, but it just ups the ante, the kind of Wild Westness of it all. So I'm like, all right, cool. And we hop on the bridge, we pay our dollar, and when we land in Matamoros on the other side, I'm telling you, it was like entering another world. The first thing I see is police officers with frickin' machine guns that are loaded, that are just walking around. I mean, just walking around. And I'm not a gun guy, so I couldn't tell you exactly what kind of gun it was beyond machine guns. They looked like the same stuff you see in movies like M16s. It became very real very quickly that this is not a place that you want to get into trouble. Right away, this little girl comes up to me, and she's maybe 3 years old, and she's just adorable. But she's so dirty. You can tell she lives on the street. Her face is dirty. And she has a rose in one hand and Chiclets, the gum, Chiclets gum in the other hand. And she's holding it up, and she's saying, please buy, in English. And I'm like, I'm sorry, sweetheart, I don't want a rose, and I don't want Chiclets gum. I didn't know why they had Chiclets gum, but there was Chiclets gum fucking everywhere. There was Chiclets gum everywhere. But she was like, please buy. I mean, and she was just adorable, this little thing. And I was thinking the whole time, where's her parents? And I was looking around, I couldn't see her parents. I'm thinking, she can't be homeless at 3, can she? I mean, there's no way. And she's pulling on my hand. And I'm like, sweetie, I'm sorry, I don't want any gum or flour. And she's holding onto my hand like she just wants to walk with me. And this thing is just tugging at my heart. And I stop and I lean down and I'm like, sweetheart, no. And she lowers her hand and she starts crying. I mean, real tears are coming down her face. So I say, you know what, sweetie, I'll take some gum. I'll take some gum, okay? And she holds the gum up. And I open my wallet, and at that time, all I had was 220s. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I still got to get home. I still got to eat for 3 days. I got $40 to my name. God. I can't just look at this girl crying and not help her. So I just gave her a 20. I'm like, here you go. She snatches $1 out of my hand, goes sprinting about 40 yards away, where next to this trash can in the shadows, her mom is sitting. And she hands her mom the money. And she beelines across the street to somebody else she sees and starts pulling the same racket. And I am just like, okay. A learning curve here, Chad. This is exactly what's going on this side of the bridge. These are scams that are going on. And on one hand, I'm upset because I got scammed. But on the other hand, man, you got to respect the hustle. These people are trying to eat and trying to live. And, there's an old saying that I believe in, and that's hungry people don't stay hungry for long. So we go walking by her mom, and I stop and I go, you got my money? And she smiles and winks at me. I'm like, okay. So we go to this first bar that we see. It's a wide open bar. And I'm still, my mind is still very much on this Kilroy story. And I go up and, they've got these Coronas, but they're smaller. They're smaller beers. I don't know how else to say it, except they're like tiny. But they do. They cost like a quarter. And I'm like, oh my God. So for the next couple hours, we proceed to just get hammered. I mean, completely hammered. And while I'm there, I go to the bathroom and I come out. I go outside just to get some fresh air and have a cigarette. And I'm buzzing so hard. I'm feeling amazing. And I start asking the security guard about the Kilroy story. And I'm just asking him, where did it happen? Where was he snatched? And, where did they find him? And he's telling me like all these details. And he finally stops and says, why are you so fascinated with this? And he speaks good English, really good English. And most of the Mexicans on that side of the border did speak really good English. And I think they kind of have to work with the U.S. crowd. And I said, well, I'm into religious studies. I'm fascinated with what this cult was, and the whole story just seems crazy to me. And he was like, well, be careful, man, because there's a lot of that going on around here. And I'm like, well, there's a lot of what going on around here? And he was like, a lot of different beliefs. And he goes, and you can find out as much as you want to know. And I remember that statement specifically, that you can find out as much as you want to know. And I didn't take it as a warning. I just took it as him telling me that it's rampant, So we talked a little bit more about it, and he was a really cool dude, and I shook his hand and said, thanks for talking to me. And I went back inside, found my group, and there's just, a raging party going on. So we continued for the next 3 or 4 hours and decided we're going to go to different bars and keep drinking. And we did. We went to different bars, kept drinking. And the one thing we were also told before we went in there is do not drink the water down here. You will get incredibly sick. Do not drink the water. Which is hard to remember when you're drunk sometimes, But to this point, I've not drunken any water. I've just drinking their little Coronas or Cervezas, whatever they were, these tiny little beers. And, it's getting to the point where the drunkenness is beyond a buzz. I am truly hammered to the point where I'm slurring and I'm, having balance issues. And I decide, I need to chill out some. And we leave that bar because we hear that there's this big open air bar. And it's a lot cooler. It's not as hot. Because a lot of these bars were just steaming on the inside. So I'm like, okay, man, let's go there. Let's do it. So we leave, and on the way there, I remember this person yelling, El Gato Negro, Donkey Show. And I'm like, what is this? And I walk by, and I'm like, El Gato Negro. He's like, yes, the black cat. And I'm like, okay. And I'm like, what's a donkey show? I had never heard of a donkey show. I had no idea what a donkey show was. And he's like, oh, come inside and see. You will like very much. And I'm like, what is a donkey show? Well, he explains to me that he's like, it's a woman and a donkey. I'm like, and they do, and he's like, I'm like, oh, get out of here, man. And he's telling me that inside there's this show where this woman is going to have sex with a donkey. And I'm like, I'm not interested, dude. Moving on, So I move on. I just like leave, and they're just yelling, El Gato Negro, donkey show. And we get all the way down to the very end of this area where that's set up for the spring breakers, basically. You can tell you don't want to go further than this. And that's where this big open air venue is. And we go inside, and it was packed. There was so many people there. And there were all these girls that are going around serving up shots. And I don't know why, but at the end of the night, we decided that, let's do some shots. So I did a couple shots, and the next thing I know, it was just like two small shots of tequila. And the next thing I know, like, the room is spinning. I'm just looking around the room, and it's literally spinning. I'm having the hardest time, like, keeping, the world still. And I eventually go outside because I feel like I'm going to throw up. I'm like, oh my God, I'm getting so sick right now. So actually, I'm pushing through people to get outside because I don't want to throw up on anybody, and I don't want to, vomit on myself. I need to get outside. So I get outside the bar, and I'm completely alone at this point. I bailed on all my friends. And I get outside. I come right outside the front door right outside to the corner of the venue, just step over this little ditch and just start throwing up like I've never thrown up. I mean, really bad stuff. And right after you throw up, you know how you kind of feel good for a second? I had thrown up, and then right after, I felt pretty good. And I'm getting ready to cross this ditch to get back up onto the main road. And I hear, "Give me your hand, my friend." And I look up, and it's that security guard. And he's reaching down to help me across. I'm like, "Oh, cool, I know this dude," you know? So I reach up and grab his hand. He pulls me across, and he's like, "Looks like you've had, you know, a little too much tonight." And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, man. I just drank those shots, and it just knocked the shit out of me." And he's like, "Yeah, there's more alcohol in that." He's like, "You know, real tequila over here is much stronger, and you got to be careful with it." I'm like, "Yeah, I don't ever even drink hard liquor." I'm like, "I just drink beer, you know." I'm like, "So that was brutal." And he's like, "Where's your friends?" And I'm like, "Oh man, I think they're inside, you know." And he's like, "Well, let's go find them and get you back with them." And I'm thinking, this dude is so freaking cool. You know, like, I mean, he's just helping me out. He's giving me info. Really cool dude. So I'm like, okay. So we go back to the door, and they tell us we're at capacity. Can't let anybody in. And I'm like, well, I was just in. I just came out to throw up. And they're like, well, you're out. I'm like, ah, you're kidding me. I'm like, no, you're out. And he goes, well, that's okay, man. He was like, you know, we can just, wait out here for him. And I'm like, well, what are you doing? He's like, oh, I just got off. No big deal. And I'm like, okay, so you just want to hang out here? And he goes, well, until you get your friends back. And I'm at that drunken state. I'm thinking, well, he's a security guard, so maybe he actually does care about people. And we did have a cool conversation. He was a cool guy. And yeah, so we just ended up hanging out outside the bar. And at some point he said, so did you find out anything more about Kilroy? I said, you know, I talked a little bit about it, but no one was interested in talking about it. So I just kind of put it away. And he's like, oh, I understand, you know, and we're just kind of walking a little bit around the area. We're not really going anywhere. We're just kind of shuffling, waiting for, you know, my friends to come out. And he goes, well, you know, the place where they first held him was right down the street here. I'm like, you're kidding me. And he goes, oh, yeah, you could see it from the street. I go, where? Show me where. And he's like, oh, it's just right down here, you know. So we start walking, and as we're walking, I get sick again. And I'm like, oh, God, hold on a second. And I throw up again. And I'm like, oh, God. I'm like, I am just so sick, man. I am so sick. And he goes, you got to get water in you. You got to get some water in you, or else you're going to get really sick. And I'm not even thinking about it. And he goes, here. And he hands me a lemonade. There's lemonade with ice in it. And there was a lemonade stand right next to us. So I guess when I was throwing up, he bought this small lemonade or got it somehow. And I didn't even think about it, but water sounded so good at that time after throwing up, having that taste in your mouth, or lemonade, whatever. So I just guzzled it. And then right after, I was like, oh, dude, wait a minute. I'm like, that's lemonade. That's water, man. That's going to make me sick as hell. And he goes, don't worry about it. No, it's different. He was like, that lemonade's made with fresh water. You're fine. I'm like, are you sure? And he's like, yeah. He goes, I'm sure. I'm like, oh, okay. So we keep walking, and he's like, yeah, we're almost there. We're still on the main strip. And we keep walking. He's like, yeah, we're almost there still. And we're getting a ways away from the area. And right as I'm about ready to go, dude, what is going on? He says, okay, here it is. It's right down there. And he points down this side alley. And in the shadows, you can barely kind of see this small building. And he goes, it's right there. And I'm like, where? And he goes, there. And I go, I can't make it out. And he goes, well, come on, we can go up to it. No one's there. It's an empty, abandoned building now. And I'm like, okay, well, I do want to get a little bit closer. So I start walking down this alley, and I'm not even really, thinking too much of kind of what's going on. And then I get a little bit closer, and I can see a little bit more of the building. And I finally stop, and I go, okay, that's good. And he goes, you want to see inside of it? I know the room they held him too. He goes, I was actually working on the case. I was part of the team that found him. And for whatever reason, that question hit me. This is fucked up. This dude's trying to get me in this room. So I look at him, and I'm standing in the middle of this alley, completely off the grid. And I look at him, and I go, No, I'm good. And he's like, are you sure? And I'm like, yeah, I'm good. And he's just quiet. He's just staring at me. I'm just staring at him. And I go, dude, I'm going to go back to the strip. And he's like, you sure? And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, you okay? I go, yeah. And it's quiet. He's staring at me. And he looks back at me and he says, you want to know more about this case? And I just took off sprinting as fast as I could back to the street, the main strip. And right before I get to the main strip, the weird thing was I look over my shoulder and he's just standing dead still where he was. He didn't even come after me. He's just standing, staring at me in that alley over my shoulder. I hit the street. I beeline back up to the building where all my friends were at, that bar, that massive bar. I can't find them anywhere. I cannot find them anywhere. I'm like, oh my God, I am alone in Matamoros, Mexico. And I start rethinking all my steps. I'm like, I came over here and right away like a dumbass, I'm asking everybody about this Kilroy case and, acting like it's, I'm so interested in and I want to know. Like, these are the wrong things to do. Okay, this is not something I should have been doing. And it's all kind of hitting me at what my steps were. And I shouldn't have ever trusted this guy. I didn't know him. He didn't know me. And I'm like, this is so freaky. So freaky. So I can't find my guys anywhere.